I burned out pretty hard a few weeks ago, and I've been able to recover quickly, become more productive, and reduce the chance of burning out again. I said that last one with my fingers crossed, but I feel pretty good about my chances. So how? Well, I read a book, and in this video I'm going to share the 4 answers that I found that not only helped me recover quickly, but improved my relationship with my creative work. Answer number 1 is one of the key tenets of slow productivity, which is the value of intentionality over speed. This means that it's better to get something done to a good level, even if that means that thing is going to take longer to do. Take comics as an example. It's better to spend an extra day doing the pencils if it means that you're happier with it in the long run and it helps to serve your story. What I would normally do is block out less time than I'd need in reality and end up rushing through the pencils or the inks or whatever part of the process I was at with my comic. I thought if I don't get these pages done by a certain time, then I'll never get them done. I valued speed over intentionality because I felt that otherwise this comic would never get finished. And that's true for pretty much every comic I've ever worked on. As recently as a few weeks ago, I had 3 pages to do, and so I blocked out 2 days on my calendar. But then after I read this book, I penciled in a 3rd day, just so I could make sure that I did it right. I slowed down, basically. On the first day, I drew this, and I was pretty happy with it. Almost immediately I was seeing results from taking my time and not stressing about deadlines. But on the 2nd day, that sucked. I drew these pages and I pretty much hated it. The poses were stiff, unimaginative, and made me annoyed that I'd drawn them in the first place. It's like I'd done myself a disservice. But if I stuck to my rigid and unrealistic schedule, then I would have given myself no choice but to ink bad pencils. I cannot stop, I must push forwards no matter what. But if you really think about it, that kind of doesn't make sense. You set the deadline, so you can move it. And nothing bad is going to happen if you do. The only thing that's going to happen is that you take 1 extra day to complete your task. And that's what I did, and I made these changes. Are these the most incredible comic book pages of all time? Hell no. But are they better? I think so, yes. These don't make me angry. It was because I slowed my process down even a little bit that I was able to get these results. And most importantly, I wasn't stressing about it. You're going to have bad drawing days, and that's totally acceptable. It happens to everyone. It happened to me on my 2nd day, and I was able to recover by slowing down, not speeding up. And this line from the book really helped me appreciate the importance of not rushing forwards towards the finishing line, but to take on each obstacle as it comes to you. Limiting missions or overarching objectives to a manageable number ensures you can devote your best work to each. For my context, that meant that I could use that 3rd day, which I didn't normally even give myself, to make the corrections and adjustments that I needed. I wasn't distracted by anything else, and I could put all of my energy into a simple and easy to understand task. And damn, it worked. It's this kind of thinking that I'm taking on board with everything that I do, and I need this sort of thinking in my life because I constantly overestimate myself. Which brings me to answer number 2, which is how we all seem to overestimate what we're actually capable of doing within a certain time frame. I think I can make a 100-page comic, pump out weekly YouTube videos, create art for an Instagram account, maintain a Patreon, and start a business all at the same time. Oh, and an email newsletter. Call it ego, call it toxic productivity, call it naive, it's probably all 3. But the fact is, I can't do all these things at once. And if I continue to try, then most of them would end up being really crappy versions of what they could be because I'd have to go at a breakneck pace, otherwise I'd just fall behind. Which means I have to use every single minute available to me to research, write, record, and edit YouTube videos. Thumbnail, pencil, ink, flat, color, and letter, 100 pages worth of a comic book. Think of interesting drawings I can create for Instagram and create a posting schedule for them. Try and find new and interesting ways to promote my Patreon, including increasing the offer to a level that's unsustainable without a huge number of backers. I have to try and offer value to my email subscribers every single week. And the big one, start an actual business with actual business plans and SWOT analyses and a 10-week course that I created and a landing page and setting up Discord accounts in Calendly and Zoom just so I could deliver on the promises I was making. When I lay it all out like that, that sounds like a lot for somebody who's doing this full time, let alone for someone who's got 2 to 3 hours in the evening. But like burnout, you don't really notice the pressure until something breaks. The problem is I want to do all of these things, except maybe Instagram. I don't mind dropping that. But I have dipped my toe into the world of TikTok every now and then, and I have convinced myself in the past that I'm able to keep up with that on top of everything else. And that's not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to do that. But I have to be honest, I've been here before. I've caught myself taking on too much in the past, quite a few times, and I promised myself in the past that I'll only focus on 1 or 2 platforms or 1 or 2 projects at a time. But then slowly over time, I'll get inspired by something else, or I'll get a bit restless and I'll add more and more projects onto my plate until I end up exactly where I started, which is a place of exhaustion and burnout. And that cycle would have continued forever unless I addressed the root cause. And I think I found it. Obviously, there's very rarely one single change that you can make and everything's better. But the biggest one that has helped me is answer number 3, which is dealing with my relationship with my schedule. I've mentioned schedule a few times because I believe it's the key to managing burnout. It doesn't matter if you only have 1 project or you try to take on 5 or 6 like I did. What really matters is having a schedule that you can manage not just this week, but for the foreseeable future. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of us tend to create schedules for others, not for ourselves. Take YouTube, for example. There's an unwritten rule within the YouTube world where you have to upload a video every single week or you won't grow that fast, or at all. And if you can do that for a few years, then you can get monetized and hire an editor, and then the editor can take a lot of the workload off from you so you can focus on making better videos, and then you can quit your job and become a full-time YouTuber. That's the dream. I'm sure you've heard something similar if you've ever tried to make it on YouTube. And I'm not even shitting on that. It hasn't worked out for me that way, but I know it has for hundreds of other people. And that's great, but that's obviously something about that doesn't work for me. And I think it's the schedule. Last year, I went from weekly uploads to 1 video every 2 weeks, and that really helped. But I'd always intended to bring it back to weekly uploads because I feared that if I didn't, it would stifle my growth. But the truth is, we're almost halfway through the year and my channel hasn't really grown that much, despite the fact that I've done, up until recently, weekly videos. And I'm not saying that the people who suggest that you do 1 video per week are wrong. There are a few channels that I watch that have been really, really helpful with me figuring out this YouTube stuff. And they offer that sort of advice, like vidIQ, Ali Abdaal, and particularly Film and Creator Booth. Believe me, there's plenty of advice on the internet that I'm more than happy to criticize, and I will be making an art-related one of those because there's a lot of information out there that I think is not just damaging to artists' careers or prospects, but I think to their health as well. And frankly, that kind of advice pisses me off. And what was I talking about? Oh yeah, hustling. One of the worst parts about being a creative person is that it's not always clear why people aren't picking up whatever it is that you're putting down. Whether that's a video, a comic, a song, an illustration, whatever it is. And so to find answers to why something isn't working, either over the short term or the long term, isn't always clear. And you start thinking to yourself that, oh, I should be louder or like this creator, or post on these platforms at these intervals on these days at this time, and then I'll get momentum. Or if I just keep creating regardless of how I'm feeling, then one of those will be a home run, and then all the other pieces of content I've made will benefit from it. A rising tide that raises all ships. Just keep hustling. But that doesn't work. At least not for me. I'm sure my attitude would be completely different if I had tens of thousands of views per video and was making a decent amount of cash, but I can only really speak about my experience, which is not that. And to be honest, the point of this isn't about gaming an algorithm or finding the best posting or creation strategy. The point is to slow down so that you can focus on what matters. And what matters is what you can control. You cannot control whether people will like what you produce. I cannot control whether people will like this video. I cannot control whether people will even notice that this video exists, let alone notice enough to form any kind of opinion on it. But you can control your own progress, and like Cal Newport says in his book, progress is not linear and breaks are essential for innovation and creativity to flourish. Another problem with leaning on a schedule, whether that's to create YouTube videos or comic book pages by a certain deadline, is that you don't allow yourself to take breaks. Now I know you can plan breaks, fine, but there are going to be times when you need to take breaks that are not planned. Or maybe the break that you do have planned needs to last a little bit longer than you had intended. Life is unpredictable. You might have a bad night's sleep, your child might be ill, you might need to prioritize your relationships, or maybe one of the other 100 million things that go wrong when our lives come up when you don't expect it, which makes planning kind of impossible. And the common wisdom to battle that is to be ahead of your schedule by at least a couple of weeks, so you've got a little bit of a buffer, between your uploads so you can remain consistent. And that's not bad advice, but you can only really use that scheduling cushion once, right? Let's just say, for argument's sake, that I'm 2 weeks ahead on making YouTube videos or comic page releases, which means I can take 2 weeks off and my schedule will remain consistent. And that's great for that 2 weeks, but then you no longer have that cushion. So how do you get it back? Surely the way to get it back is that you have to hustle to create that extra content so that you have another 2 weeks ahead of you. But that's more likely to lead to burnout because you're overworking yourself. So then you need to take a break, which means you need to use the cushion again, which means you then have to come back and work even harder to bring that cushion back. And it's a cycle that keeps on going. And it's worse than that, because then when you do need to take breaks, you're suddenly starting to feel anxious or guilty because you know that when that break's over, you have to work even harder to bring that cushion back so that you might have to take another break in the future. I mean, maybe that's just my experience, but that's why that advice wasn't the solution for me, at least not on its own. It's not a magic bullet like I originally thought it was. So as far as my schedule for the comic that I'm working on, Flowers and Shadows, goes, there isn't one. I'm not looking at 2025 or 2026 or 2027 as to when my comic will be ready. There's no point mentioning 2024 because even if I do go hell for leather, this ain't getting done this year. No, instead of looking at when I'm going to be drawing my final pages for this book, I'm only focusing on the pages that I have to draw today or this week. So I simply don't know when the comic's going to be ready. And I quite like the idea of that. And finally, answer number 4 is about picking the most important thing that serves you the most and prioritizing that. Slow productivity, from what I've understood of it, is about getting rid of distractions that don't directly serve the most important tasks in your life. And I'll never get to the final page of my comic if I don't complete the next one, which means that the current page that I'm working on is the most important thing. Which means I no longer think about deadlines. They're kind of arbitrary. They don't really mean anything. Now, don't get me wrong, life is all about balance. It's not about being completely carefree and never having a deadline for anything. Deadlines and schedules aren't inherently bad, and they're useful for keeping you on track and keeping you honest. But when they become just as important as the work itself, then I think that's when you really need to reassess and pump the brakes a bit and just slow down. Are you taking on too much? And what are the most important things that you do to you? If you had to stop doing everything except maybe 1 or 2 things, what would those 2 things be? That's a good way of answering what's important to you, by the way. You can have that for free. For me, it's making videos for this YouTube channel and my comic. They're the 2 creative outlets that I find the most fulfilling. And I've decided that for YouTube, I'm not going to make a video unless I have something to say or something to share. Although I'll probably still do my Draw With Me videos because I actually really enjoy those. And also I'm actively working on the comic while I make them, so it kind of feels like a win-win. But for everything else, I'm not going to make a video unless I have something to say or something to share. And if I ever feel like I'm trying to come up with ideas because I'm on a schedule or I'm worried that if I don't, then people will forget that I exist, then I'll stop myself and do something else that's much more productive than that, like work on my comic or read a book. Because if I continue down that path of sticking to a schedule so rigidly that I don't allow myself to breathe, then I'm going to end up exactly where I was a couple of weeks ago, and I really don't want to. I'm kind of bored of feeling tired. And to be honest, writing this video was extraordinarily easy because I feel quite deeply about this and I have something to say about it. And I know that I've felt this way in the past, and I know that I've tried to search for answers, but haven't really found any. So maybe there's answers in this video for somebody else. And that's a nice, lovely, warm, fuzzy bonus to doing stuff like this. And for all the channels and all the answers that are out there, which aren't bad, I'm not saying that my video is better than theirs or that their intentions are bad or anything like that. But I know that at the time, the advice that they gave wasn't what I needed to hear. I didn't need to hear that I have to make a video a week on YouTube or that I have to block out certain times in my calendar, because that wasn't the answer to my problems. The answer to my problems was that I was just simply taking on too much and I needed to slow down. And maybe that's something that you need to hear right now. Maybe you need to slow down and focus on what's the most important thing to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And take it from someone who has consistently taken on way too much because they're too over optimistic or too ambitious, or maybe too naive, it's worth doing. Even if it's just for a week, just try it, just slow down and just see what impact that has on your energy levels and your inspiration and your creativity. Because YouTube and the internet in general has a lot of distractions. Lots of shiny objects are thrown in our faces every day, and incredible promises of opportunities are made left and right. And it's really easy to think, oh, I just need to create a community through an email newsletter, or I'll start a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel, and I'll make a mini comic which I can post on Webtoon, all while studying at university, which is exactly what I did while I was at university a couple of years ago. And if that works for you, more power to you. I'm just an old man yelling at the clouds, shouting about how it hasn't worked for me, and it just made me tired and cranky. I think the main takeaway from all of this is that as long as you've figured out what's most important to you as a creator, then don't listen to any of the noise or the distractions around you, unless you can take that extra workload on without impacting the thing that's the most important. And there is a way to find out whether what you're doing is actually causing a negative or a positive effect on the thing that's most important to you. So let's just pretend that the most important thing for you is to make a comic, but you also want to do X, Y, and Z. So start off with X and see if your comic suffers with quality, or if you're finding it more difficult to make the comic, or if you're just becoming a bit more tired than you normally would. If one of those three things is significant enough, then you know that you shouldn't even start X yet. Just focus on the comic. If you can do X and the comic doesn't change, or at least your progress with the comic doesn't change, great, try X. Maybe then introduce Y and see how it impacts the comic. And don't ignore the signals that your body is giving you. And don't ignore what your eyes and brain are thinking about your own comic as well. Because it's really easy to ignore those because we want to take on more stuff. Because I want to do all of the things that I've described in this video. I want to do them now. And I want to do them all the time. But I know that I can't push myself to do more than I'm currently doing. I know what my limits are, and I need to start respecting that. And if you don't start respecting your limits, then you may end up burning out too. And the good news is that I don't feel tired anymore. At least no more tired than what I assume is normal. And if you're among the elite few who's made it this far into this video, then have a look at my Patreon page, because right now it's the only way to support the channel. And I offer mentoring for comics because I really enjoy doing that. And so if you're struggling with your comic, I may be able to help. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.